This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. What I'm looking at today is 2021's Zach Snyder's Justice League, directed by Zach Snyder. And I don't think I need to go into how troubled, how controversial a production Justice League was. From Zach Snyder's daughter dying of a suicide to Joss Whedon coming in to complete the movie. All sorts of drama around it. Though, as I said then, and I continue to say now, Zach Snyder, I believe, was essentially fired from this production. And having seen Justice League, his version of Justice League I should say, I understand why. This is, for the most part, a dreary, needlessly somber movie. Now keep in mind, in and of itself, being dreary and somber isn't a bad thing, in that some good movies have happened to be dreary and somber. But the thing is, Snyder's Snyderverse, for lack of a better term, are built on certain films. Films like Man of Steel, films like Wonder Woman, and the place where they end up doesn't feel like a natural culmination of events. The foundation of Zack Snyder's Justice League is rotten, is broken. As a result, even if Joss Whedon didn't enter the picture and Warner Bros. Executives, for whatever reason, had faith in what Snyder was doing, there was no way it was going to work. It just does, nothing gels. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Zack Snyder's Justice League is not necessarily what he was planning to do before he was replaced, had to leave, whatever you think happened. Because Zack Snyder's Justice League is the product of forethought, in the sense that it's a product of taking into account what was said about Man of Steel, what was said about Wonder Woman, what was said about Suicide Squad, and using that information to create a new product. That would not have been the case with Justice League. So, for people who seem to have the weird idea that this movie just sitting in a can waiting to be released is nonsense. There was no Snyder cut. This is the product of, as I said, after the fact thinking. And that's okay in and of itself, but it just didn't need to be. Looking at it and having seen Justice League, which I'm going to re-review, by the way, I just want to see it again. There's too much similar to the version that Joss Whedon released for me to really care, and that if you've seen Joss Whedon's version, you've kind of seen Justice League. Sure, there'll be differences from Joss Whedon's version and Zack Snyder's version, but the footage that Whedon uses, most of it is from this movie. And so it's not, for me, worth the bother. The movie is something to the effect of 3 hours long, and you feel every second of it. It is divided up into 2 DVDs, and the first DVD was almost unwatchable. That's not to say it's bad, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that it's so repetitive, based on if you've seen Justice League, and it gives you very little in a way that's new. The way Zack Snyder tackles this material is that he invests more in certain storylines. So, Cyborg has a lot more to do in this version than he did in Joss Whedon's version. More space is given to the Amazons and what happens to them, revolving around Darkseid. I always pronounce that Darkseid, but in any case, Darkseid, I believe it is. But the thing is, I'm not sure I really care. I don't really care to see more about the Amazons and their situation. I didn't care to see more about what Cyborg was going through because it was done in a relatively unfulfilling manner and with the self-indulgence that is typical to Zach Snyder projects, which is to say lots of slow motion shots and stuff of that nature. And I've kind of noticed something. Zack Snyder likes to film people entering rooms from above. It's, for the most part, a pointless shot. I don't know why he does it, but it's not uncommon for him. In any case, this project seems more than anything else just self-indulgent. It's really lit from what Joss Whedon did. And that's welcome, actually. Visually, I think it looks better. It's not as bright. The costumes oftentimes don't look as silly as they sometimes did in Joss Whedon's version, but it's not worth redoing it for. And I don't recall the writer who wrote this with Snyder. I believe it was the writer of Argo. His name is eluding me right now. Though, he's not... See, I can't say he's not a good writer because Argo seemed to be acknowledged to be a well-written. That being said, Zack Snyder's Justice League is not a well-written movie. And the motivation for people doing things is oftentimes really confusing. For instance, initially I want to say for the first half of the movie, you believe that Darkseid and Steppenwolf are doing what they do to terraform the Earth, to make it more like Apocalypse. And I guess that's true, but around midpoint is also introduced the, apparently, they're looking for the Antilife equation, which it doesn't really explain what it is, though by its name it sounds bad. But my thinking is, introduce that right off the bat. Make that the reason he's invading at all. The terraform the Earth is just a byproduct. The main goal is to find the Antilife equation and make that the whole point of what Steppenwolf is doing. Why is he looking on Earth? Why is it on Earth? Is it just coincidence? Apparently it was, but that's really flimsy reasoning. Make it so that the movie explains possibly why it's on Earth. It just happens to be on Earth. And so the impetus for Darkseid doing what he's doing, and Steppenwolf by extension, seems to change now. Sure, they're terraforming the planet, but it's the Antilife equation that's really driving events. This is silly. As I said, have one or the other. Terraform the planet or Antilife equation. Of course, as I also said, you can have both, one being the result of the other. But if you choose that route, the primary motivation has to be the quest for the Antilife equation. Otherwise, it just makes no sense. It comes off kind of dumb, which it does in Zack Snyder's movie. As I said earlier, lots of scenes are given more time to breathe. But, as I also said, there doesn't seem to be a point for a lot of them. As in, they were cut from Joss Whedon's version for a reason. They provided space for stuff that didn't need to be there in the first place. And I get the feeling that's exactly the case with Zack Snyder's Justice League. He included details not because they needed to be there, but because he needed to fill space. Many of the larger scenes that aren't in Joss Whedon's movie feel that they're there mainly because I have film and I need to fill space, not because this needs to be there. And that's a bit of a problem. Both versions treat Flash almost as comic relief, which is odd, if only because he is probably one of the most powerful people in DC. Certainly more powerful than Batman. And he's treated in a fashion that's very jokey. And I guess if you're not aware of the character at all, that maybe makes sense. But for people who are, and they allude to it a lot in the movie, this guy is able to run at speeds, literally the speed of light. And he's able to turn back time, something that Superman has only managed in these movies up to this point. So the idea that he's treated as he's treated is kind of weird. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Batman doesn't benefit from Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. He should be more in the realm of Hawkeye from the Avengers, which is to say he's a man amongst these godlike deity, which isn't to say that he couldn't somehow become the leader of this ragtag gang of superheroes. What I am saying is they don't show that in the movie. So watching it, I'm always wondering, why is Batman necessarily in the lead? He is probably he is definitely the weakest character of them all. He just happens to be, as the Flash said when they first met, wealthy. That's it. The third act of Zack Snyder's Justice League is when it really comes alive, which is when the Justice League, the newly formed Justice League, are invading the stronghold of Steppenwolf. This is when the movie is most interesting. It's still not worth what you had to sit through to get to it, though. It looks visually much better than what Joss Whedon did. Only because in the original Red scheme that it was treated, it looks so much better than what Joss Whedon did. I don't even remember it, but I remember it being garish. So it looks better. And the way Steppenwolf looks visually, I think, is more interesting in Zack Snyder's interpretation. But it doesn't warrant a new movie. He looks more, as I said, interesting, but he's not really different because Joss Whedon is using the material provided to him by Zack Snyder. So he goes through the same beats in this movie as he did with Joss Whedon's, except that some scenes are longer and there are more of them. So he appears more often and he looks more interesting, I should say, than he did in Joss Whedon's take. But it's still not worth sitting through. This is an overindulgent bit of a mess. And is it better than Joss Whedon's 2017 movie? Sure, in the sense that it's more visually consistent and it's telling a more cohesive story. But that doesn't change the fact that that story is still not well thought out, not very interesting, and way overlong. There's no reason this movie should have been 3 hours, because it is virtually unwatchable in this state. I watched it over a period of, I want to say, as many days. And as I also said, it only began to work for me in the last third. Zack Snyder's Justice League is overindulgent. It doesn't make a lot of sense narratively. It's more Zack Snyder than I think any person should have to take. It's not bad, but once again, calling it better than Joss Whedon's movie, I think, has huge caveats. Just the fact that Whedon's movie is shorter, for me, works a lot better, because there is no reason this should be as long as it is. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.